everything a couple moments. Looks like Facebook is already initiating here. YouTube seems to be initiating. We're going to give it a few moments as we get started. Z, if you have audio, please go ahead and take it. Start us out. Thank you, everyone. Here we go. Thank you. All right, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Z, that was amazing. So here we are once again. For those of you guys that have streamed down in the room in that strange little corner of the world, wherever you are, we got a few people in the house. So if you're watching, I want to start out by saying, please do share this video, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Facebook. Please do share the video. What we're going to be doing today, you guys, is just talking about some of the strange things in the world. If you guys have seen my broadcast before, I have kind of it's sort of an accidental show that was kind of like just formed by me around just some of the work that I've been doing and some of the multi-dimensional weirdness that I've been operating in over the past couple of years. I was one of those people where I learned very early on it was difficult for me to get on people's shows, and I wasn't on anyone's podcast, and I had to create my own little niche in this world and in this scene. And so what I did is I decided I'm going to create Matthew's own little weird version of everything. And so over the past few months, we've been kind of just facilitating these weird little talks or these conversations or these lives. And what we do is just kind of create just a vibe and an openness where we can talk about some of the more bizarre elements of our community, the weirdness, the strange multi-dimensionality, maybe the level to which we're all connected and what's really going on in this strange realm. Because if there's one thing I've figured out over the past couple of years is that my sort of viewpoint into this whole strange little multi-dimensional soul group is a little bit different than yours. It's a little bit different than Z's. It's a little bit different than Roger and Jace and Alex. And one of the things I've noticed about this soul group of individuals that are coming to rise right now in this sort of like collective movement is that each and every person has their own individual flavor, their own individual modality, their own frequency of healing or clearing or information dissemination, whatever it may be. We're coming to the stage in our collective evolution in which we're watching and experiencing, and we are also, you know, becoming those beings that are bringing that forward. And so if you're one of a few people that seem to have found this over on social media, please help spread the word, get this call out. There's literally a frequency that is being emitted here, and it's going to be drawing individuals that are capable of receiving this frequency into this moment. And so what we're going to be doing here today is just talking about a few strange things, and I'm going to introduce our guest. As some of you guys know, I am, I can't even say my own name, Matthew. And yeah, this is my channel, the School of Multidimensional Intuition. If you guys are watching on Facebook, you're just watching on my profile, and you're already probably totally annoyed by all my postings anyway. So thanks for hanging out. But that said, who do we have today? We have ZArtStar Healer. I think Z and I met, I think it was 2016, I believe, which if you don't know, everybody, that's ancient history by now, right? That's like many lifetimes ago. Both her and I were actually in totally different bodies the first few times we met, and we are now actually at this stage of the journey. And so Z's been going through her own individual process the last few years, and she's been a very important ally in this strange mission that we're on. And likewise, Jace as well. You guys saw him last week when we were doing this little talk. And Jace has been a person who's also going through this very interesting path of awakening and activation. To get technical and weird, I think Jason and I were involved in some interesting schools in either past lives or concurrently running timelines in which we're actually in a class or some sort of an academy like together. And so it's interesting to see how that path is also followed on some level in this world. So it's very, very good to have you here. Pardon me as I'm already drooling on myself, but we also have Roger Richards. And Roger Richards, for those of you guys who already know, probably know, he's a creator of, I think it was Above, I can't even say the word, Above Majestic and the Cosmic Secret. He had a huge hand. He's, as I understand, you are the actual creator of those. Is that like correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And so Roger's here with us today to talk about what he's doing, what he's bringing also to Camp Disclosure, and just some of the amazing and very interesting things that he is also bringing to this strange soul group. And for those of you guys also that don't know, this is a weird aside. Only Roger here in this entire group knows this. A couple years ago, I went to this conference, right? The Secret Space Program conference. And this random person I never met before sent me a Facebook message and said, hey, I want you to come to this party or this thing. And I was like, huh? Okay. And I did. And as a result, a whole bunch of very interesting, strange meetings and alliances, and also eventual realizations took place, eye-opening realizations that we are now all just living with and watching play out in the collective consciousness. So Roger, in his own way, has been a very, very interesting person. I've been seeing his path. And Alex, I'm also very, very new to your work, but you know what? I actually checked you out prior to coming in here. And I started looking at some of your interviews, and I want to be very upfront by saying you carry such an amazing frequency of authenticity.
Thank you.
I think is honestly, I'm going to be really real, and some people that are watching this might get triggered. It's very rare. It's incredibly rare. There is like a genuineness that I think you exude that I think makes the information and just your presence online and that version of you that shows up very accessible to people. And so while I am not as familiar with your work, it's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well. And so that said, I'm going to hand it over. We're going to start the discussion. I'm going to just intro once again, because I've been rambling here for a while. Our first topic. For those of you guys that have watched me before, you know I like to talk about the concept of a mind virus. And everyone already knows exactly what we're talking about. All we have to do is say mind virus. But this particular frequency, from my perspective, has been so pervasive that we are now seeing the level to which it is bleeding into the thought forms and the fears and the social conditioning and the manner to which each of us, whether it's positively or negatively, is presenting themselves online. The version of us is switching, it's changing, it's being constantly formed. And so it's my opinion, everyone, that this mind virus affects every one of us, whether it's positively or negatively, to the extent that we are experiencing extreme polarization of viewpoints. No matter what it is, it's taking a very extreme form. And so what I'm hoping we can do is start out this discussion today with each of you talking about, like, what's your experience with this extreme polarity, with the intensity, with the manner to which your friends and family members have suddenly shifted, or maybe you yourself have shifted. And now we're presenting or speaking or acting as something else. And so however you guys interpret that, whether it be a question or a comment, I'll start it out there. Go ahead. Yes. Oh yeah. Sorry. Z. Yeah. Go ahead. I think you're gonna go first. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is ZArtStar Healer. This is actually a panel discussion that we are putting together as a kind of a sneak preview to this event that we're all going to be speaking and presenting at, called Camp Disclosure, at the end of August in North Carolina. I think that it's probably one of the only in-person family gatherings that I've seen around. So I think that it's going to be really special after this entire quarantine thing that we have been experiencing this year. We all could use some hugs, and so I'm really excited. I'm holding strong and true to this path that we're all going to end up at that very special coordinate in North Carolina and seed some magic together there. So what an interesting time we are swimming around in. I feel like I want to kick off this conversation by just reminding us that, you know, these ancient words, as they say, as within, so without. I feel like, you know, this mind virus is really a reflection of like all the chaos. Let's say all the chaos that we see in the external world is a good reflection of the amount of chaos and confusion that we as a humanity have garnered through living out of alignment with ourself and nature for a very long time. So we're at kind of this crux point in our planetary aliveness where it's like we have to decide if we want to continue being alive on this planet and continue to explore the evolution of what we can become, or continue on our path of destroying life itself and be decimated and, you know, have to start this adventure all over again. And as I am one to fully believe that we got it this time, that we are on this great trajectory to fulfilling the angelic potential that we all are. However, this is just like this moment in time when we are all being invited to activate our inner alchemist, our inner healer, our inner shaman, so that we can get our energy right and actually claim our power to create something that we really want to see out of the world. And how we do that is through doing this dance of going within and seeing the outside, doing the work that we need to be doing inside. You know, how do we feel about the abandoned and abused parts of our own innocence, right? I know that there is so much stuff coming out these days about human trafficking and pedophilia, and like all of those things exist external to us. And when we first discover it, you could be like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do about that? Like, if the most powerful thing on this planet is doing that, like, who am I to do anything about it? Like, how can I even start to do anything? And I just want to reel it back into the heart and say, okay, the first step that we have to take is to go inside and see where those energies exist inside of ourselves. Where do we feel like we have been abused by this force that's parasitic? Where in our own life are we being parasitic? Where in our own life are we presenting, you know, aspects of this virus that are not in resonance with life itself? And we'll find that as we come into resonance in ourselves, that the solutions that are in that resonance will come through you, but only as you're working through those frequencies inside. So then we receive the solutions and we're actively working on the external world. And again, it has to start inside first. And we do this dance inside, outside. So if you're somebody who's screaming and saying, oh my God, the world is run by pedophiles and everything is terrifying and I have no idea what to do, go inside, meditate. I know that it sounds crazy. Like, you know, how are you going to change anything if you're just sitting in your house doing nothing? But I feel like there is a very great intelligence that is moving the world right now that we're all a part of. And this greater thing, you know, we can call it Gaia, we can call it Mother, we can call it God or Spirit, whatever it is. We could just call it evolution. It's driving everyone and it's driving us. And so ultimately, everything that's happening, no matter what it looks like, how chaotic and dark and scary and torturous it may look like, we have to understand that is moving us towards that place of what they call heaven on earth, or whatever you want to say, new earth, 5D, whatever it is. And that the more, the better that we can connect with that force, that oneness, that force of aliveness, the better that we can hear it, the better we can step into alignment and co-creation with it. So that's all I got for now.
Yeah, go ahead, Jace. And also, just as you get started, I want to let everybody know, it looks like we are getting suppressed on Facebook. I'm just going to say it straight up.
I was going to say that.
I'm monitoring this, and so I just had to set it to public once again. Facebook likes to change the settings. So if you're watching this and you're on Facebook, do us a favor and share this video. Help get it out, because there's a very interesting type of suppression that occurs with the algorithms. As soon as we say certain things, it's very interesting. So anyway, Jace, go ahead. Sorry to just roll in.
Well, first, thank you, Matthew, for hosting the space for us all and for that wonderful introduction of everybody. And thank you, Z, for outlining that kind of the big picture of everything that's going on energetically. And I guess what I'll share is kind of my experience with the mind virus more tangibly, what I've noticed. And that's come from growing up and living in California my whole life to now not living in California for the past year and noticing this huge difference in the, generally the collective consciousness and the vibration. But the more that I'm outside of that space on like the West Coast, I'm noticing that there was an infringement upon the collective consciousness that is very present there. And I think it's present really along the whole West Coast and probably the whole East Coast as well. I mean, and a lot more places, but that's where I've noticed it most heavy. And it's really like this, it kind of acts as an echo chamber in a lot of ways, where the people in those areas are made to think through various kind of mind control tactics, frequency-based, psychological, all sorts of things, made to think that what they believe is what the greater majority believes. And that there's this element of, there's other psychological elements that are playing into that, like the victimization and thinking that the more that we victimize ourselves, the more we're justifying what we believe. And that is really, really heavy in California and that whole area. And that's what I've noticed since being out here. So yeah, that's all I want to share right now.
Yeah, I could definitely relate with the different geolocations having different kind of, experiences collectively. It's like, I get the mental picture of like schools of fish coagulating together or pools of mercury coagulating together. It's like these collective thought bubbles kind of create these, little pockets within the larger collective consciousness where these things are working themselves out. It's almost like an equation, a thought, or, mind virus, however you kind of want to put it. If I'm looking at the collective experience right now and trying to look through the archetypal mind and perceive kind of multiple layers and metaphors that are playing out, it's like we've got, the mind virus that we talk about as far as, the control program and the matrix and the beliefs of thought that have us kind of locked here. But then we've got this parallel in the natural world of this like COVID virus and this virus that's there, for us to experience on a physical level. And so like with a viral infection, the virus breaks at the, fever point of like the highest fever. It breaks there when you're kind of in that really, really intense fever point where, you know, you're hallucinating, you're cold sweating, you know, has a real intense physical effect on you. And that's what I see in the collective consciousness of the world right now, like globally, is this fever that's escalating to that point where it's going to break. But the fever beforehand, you know, people will puke, people will get diarrhea, people will, you know, hallucinate and you know, go through whatever they need to go through in that collective experience to, you know, break that fever and get through on the other side. And so, like, in relationship to the mind virus, and you know, there's groups that can be considered part of that virus, and there's groups that are the antibodies, and, like, you know, the ones that are stepping in to engage dialogue like this, you know, having conversations like this type of communication can reach people in ways that don't, you know, force them back into their own programming, doesn't traumatize them even more, but just gives them a space to kind of untie their ball of yarn and listen to others in that same experience. So this process of talking this stuff out collectively in groups right now, especially in this way that you're doing it in circles and kind of creating a mini social memory complex of dialogue, this is the type of stuff that I feel like is the most healing right now for that virus and the most important. So that's my comment on it. To you, Alex?
Yeah, good. This is great. I love these sorts of discussions. That's why I love being a part of panels like this and having Camp Disclosure where we can all meet in person, because this is like the leading edge of what's really going on in the world. And I think that's what I love so much about being with, like, my Truther fam, because you can talk about these concepts and, like, you don't have to go into a lot of definition really describing what you mean by that or, like, defend yourself. It's like we all get it, and we're all just kind of brainstorming in terms of, like, what to do next. So I guess the studious side of me was taking notes as all of you guys were talking to kind of have some ideas that I wanted to share. So mind virus, the first idea that came to my mind was this concept that we kind of misascribe to what this word means, but the word meme. So the word meme refers to this idea that you have an idea that goes, quote unquote, viral, right? That you can spread communication very quickly. And so what's happening right now is we are in a civil war, but it's a psychological one predominantly. And so you have kind of the propaganda and the extension of kind of the dying death gurgles of this 6,000-year-old cult, compared to kind of the folks who are awakening or who are already have been on that path, you know, and have done their kind of homework. And so it's the warfare, the battlefield, so to speak, is kind of predominantly on social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc. And what you're seeing right now is there's a big pushback with disclosure, with information, like Wayfair that came out, you know, yesterday. That's a huge kind of uncovering in terms of how this exists and how this communication that's all done in code gets expressed. So, you know, in terms of, like, one of the things that we can do, you know, it's like what Z was saying, like, when I first came across this a few years ago, I initially felt so disempowered. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, this has been going on for so long. What can little old me do to contribute to this? And so this will be no surprise for any of you who know me, but, like, co-opting what the word meme means by using now what we colloquially call a meme, right? Like word pictures, that you can spread information in a very quick amount of time through memes. So that's kind of one way to co-opt this mind virus. In this case, what we're doing is we're fighting a mind virus with another, and I'll use this in air quotes, like mind virus. In this case, it's like a positive virus, or it's like what Roger was saying, like the antibodies is truth, you know, is fact. So, you know, I think another real piece here, and, you know, Roger, you touched on this as well, is like energy. You know, everything, the most important topic, in my opinion, if we had to put it to one word, that one word is vibration. And so with energy, you see this show up in terms of our individual frequencies, and you see this show up in terms of, like, the collective consciousness, the collective energy. And this energy can be like manipulated, controlled, pooled, organized. And this is why the psychological warfare is so effective, why you have propaganda that's now legally been shown to be legal, thanks to prior presidents who have now made this, greenlit, that you don't even have accurate information being come out, and you have so much suppression that's going on because you're limiting the degree that the average person is able to mentally handle. And so you're able to manipulate that collective energy or that kind of complex. So this is why you're seeing in a lot of big cities so much destruction that's going on. It's predominantly in the inner cities. And I think a big part of that is because these folks are kind of tapping into like this hive mind, this collective energy that's there. I mean, before a few months ago, we weren't talking about racism at all. That wasn't even on most people's radar. And now all of a sudden it's everywhere, right? So, but, I think the most important thing here, back to like a sense of empowerment, is we can go back to working on this by doing our inner work. And that's, I think, what's so important. In the field of psychology, there's a buzz term, and it's called locus of control. And what that refers to is whether or not we have, I'll throw out another buzz term, a sense of agency, which means, are we able to control our environment? Do we feel as though we have some sort of hand in our life and in terms of making change in terms of what we see and perceive as the world around us? And like what we see with like folks who struggle with depression, they have what's called an external locus of control. They come from a place of disempowerment. There's nothing I can do. I can't make change. I'm just going to be like this forever. It's like Eeyore, And so a lot of this is about empowering people to change or turn that locus of control to become more internal, to have that sense of like, yes, I can make change in my life. And now if you're a part of like this great awakening, I can make change in the collective. I can add to the additional energies that are going out there in a positive way, right? Like Hugh says, from dark to light. And so I think with this, how we do that is understanding that we live in a holographic universe. So what we do on the inner is going to reflect to the whole. And so that's where we can reclaim our sense of empowerment by knowing that by us doing the inner work, it's not as though you are somehow not a part of this movement in some sort of way, like you're just isolating or turtling, putting your head in the sand, that you are actually contributing to this work. And this is why, you don't have to have 100% eyes on with all of the trafficking that's going on and like the evil things that are taking place. You're not going to have every single person be aware of this, nor do you have to. But when you can raise the collective vibe enough that then we reach a tipping point. And we're already seeing signs of this, like with the Schumann resonance. If you follow that, for me, that's been so enlightening of like when I have those days where I'm like, man, I just feel off. And I look to the Schumann, I'm like, oh, well, there you go. It makes sense, And Jace, Alexis talks about this a lot. And I'm so thankful for like her channel and her work because she's able to add a lot of information and education just to kind of what the Schumann means. So let's see in my scribblings if there's anything else. So I think one idea to add to this, a word that I use, is the word contrast, which means if there's anything that shows up in our life that's contrary to what we want or what we would prefer to like quote unquote manifest, that we just have a simple word that we can put on that of contrast. And so unfortunately, what we need to do in order to wake up the masses, because to some degree, this is a numbers game in terms of raising awareness and having the collective vibe increase, is that we need to have more of this dark energy come to light. That's how you heal it. You have to bring it to the surface. And so you're going to see, unfortunately, in the next few months leading up to the election, a lot more negativity, a lot more division, violence, hatred, etc. And so it's like that quote from, what's that movie about the end of the world? But it's like you need to bring the population to the brink of destruction in order for them to awaken. And so that's why we're feeling so much heat, so much pressure. Joe Dispenza uses a metaphor and he calls it the watermelon seed. And when, you hold on to one of those slippery little guys and then you squeeze it, you can maybe hold on to it for a little while. But once you apply enough pressure, that guy just like shoots out at incredible speed. And so that's kind of what's happening now, that you're being presented with so much information that's in your face, so much contradiction, like the need for lockdowns and the need for social distancing and wearing masks. But at the same time, you have this double standard with signed open letters by over 1,000 health professionals encouraging people to go out and protesting, saying that you don't have to wear masks, you don't have to socially distance because you're doing so in the name of racism, and you can have up to 100 people meet. However, if you're just going to socially loiter and have fun with friends or family, you can have no more than 12, and you must practice all of these safety standards. So people are like, well, wait a minute, that's not adding up. Or this double standards of like governors that rules for thee, but not for me. And so this contradiction is going to continue to awaken people because that's what's needed right now. So those are just some ramblings that I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Okay, cool. Thank you. Also, especially for mentioning a couple of keywords, I'm just going to throw it in there because I'm like, whoa, that instant vibration of affinity. And that was, you mentioned the locus of control, or rather the strong internal locus of control. And so for those of you guys that are familiar with that, he's talking about actual structures in the body. And I know from Alex's viewpoint, we're talking about psychological, concepts or human behavioral elements, but from internally in the human energy body, you're also describing very specific anatomical areas. And one of them we're actually working with in a class that I'm doing right now. So I'm like, whoa, listen to that interesting synchronicity. And that's the ZArtStar chakra. For a lot of us right now, just who will identify as star seeds or wanderers or multidimensional beings, or even if you're just now coming aware of the idea that, maybe I'm not from here. A lot of us are experiencing a loss of energy down in the ZArtStar chakra, right underneath our body. It causes us to feel disillusioned, not a part of, unable to completely refill or renew our energy. It also causes us to feel as if on a certain level we have very little power over what's happening inside us or around us. And it gives people this sense of disempowerment. It also interacts with the root chakra. And then finally, this whole other area, which has been, I've been seeing it showing up on Facebook and everywhere all of a sudden. Maybe the AI is reading my mind. It usually is. But that said, the spleen chakra, and a lot of people out there are now becoming aware of maladies or situations or energies or emotions that are showing up on the left side of the body. And what's happening for all of you guys that are listening is, on a collective level, we're also experiencing an activation of additional energy centers and like literal actual portals in the human body that were designed to activate or open up during this time period for the express purpose of creating this pressurization in the human energy body, forcing everyone to kind of look at a certain thing or to view things a certain way, or pressing on that little element of yourself where you're all, and you instantly get triggered. And so for all those of you that are out there trying to figure out, well, okay, guys, that's great commentary, but what's actually true? How do we know what's actually real? There's a million memes, and like one of them says, that so-and-so is going to come back from the dead. And just the other day, if you haven't seen, Princess Diana is waiting in the wings to suddenly reappear. And so, people are passing this stuff around, and we all watch it and we see it and we're like, oh my God, okay, there's children coming up out of a tunnel. And it's like instantly our body reacts. And we're coming to this stage in our, like the evolution of our collective intuitive abilities, where that internal locus of control is more important than ever before. And so one of the things I'm noticing already about this group that's here on this talk here today is each and every person here has a very strong idea of what they're bringing, of who they are, what it is that they're creating in this world. I mean, literally, look at the people here. We all have our own little weird, frequency. But that said, we're dealing with a soul group of millions of people out there who are just awakening, and they're coming online and they're seeing this whole thing, and, they're like tripping out. And it's very challenging. So my question is next for everyone here. It's kind of a loaded question, but how do we identify the frequency of truth? How do you in your own world, how do you feel what's actually true? What tells you what's real? You know what I mean? What's the feeling that you get? And what, how does that work for you? I really hope that question makes sense, but go ahead, Z.
This is an awesome question. Thank you for directing this in this way, Matthew. I feel like the most important part of me that discerns is most definitely my inner children. There's a lot of things that can speak about all of these different mind intellectual ideas that it might sound true. You're like, oh, that's an interesting idea, or like, that's probably true. But, or even like spiritual teachers, or like people who are, whistleblowers or whatever, whoever it is that is coming out to say like, I want to lead people, or like, I'm here to share some sort of information that I want you to believe in. So even if that information kind of sounds interesting to my brain, the first being inside me that I'll bring out is my inner children. And, most of the time they will have an immediate reaction, and their reaction is usually based on how that energy makes them feel. So like if something makes my inner child feel like, they have to act a certain way, or they'll be judged, or they'll be bad if they, believe or not believe something, then that's like an immediate energy which shuts down that part of me that is free, that is 100% itself, that is 100% my soul, which is created perfect and delightful and in enjoyment and absolute appreciation of life at all times. And so I feel like what's important to recognize, and I'm happy that you brought up the Earth Star, because one of the ways the Earth Star chakra relates, how I relate to this chakra, is how we understand reality. Is very kind of like, it's kind of like the root chakra in that way, but the Earth Star is even deeper in that it feels like this mycelium of, interconnected consciousness around the planet. And it has to do with the human collective's understanding and relationship with the planet. So for example, the majority of our collective right now, as let's say brainwashed, mind virus by the education system, believes that the 3D and things that are physical are dead, and that there's no way there could be consciousness inside of them, even about like trees or plants. Like we look at them like there's just like this inanimate physical thing that's dead. And so that is like a thing that we believe to be true about our physical reality. And so as you can see, if we turn that side by side into how we used to interact with the planet as humans, we used to communicate with giant trees because we believe that they were giant portals through realms, which they totally are. And we, gave thanks to the earth because we felt like she was giving us life force energy. And, these were like deeply ingrained aspects of our experience with our physical reality that is totally kind of shut down or disconnected now in our current way of living. And so think about vibrationally the energy that you feel when you are walking through the forest and there's like a stream that's just trickling by, and there's just leaves that are glistening in the wind, and the vibration of your brain that you're in. Think about the brainwave patterns and how it feels in your body to be in that vibration, versus say when you're walking down the street in New York City and there's just like 8 billion cars and Wi-Fi routers all over the place. There's like a visceral and palpable difference in the vibration that we feel inside of our body. So essentially, we're kind of paying attention, becoming mindful of the organic vibrations of life and the artificial intelligence, the artificial matrix of energy, and how this is kind of like we can see it as the source of the illness, because then every other thing that's in society is kind of like a branch of it. So let's say our current widely accepted schools of religion. So I'll tell the story. When I was giving birth to my baby, I had studied the last 6 months on how I can have an orgasmic birth. This is like, I was just absolutely obsessed with this idea because I saw a video of this woman giving birth to a baby, and she was having like the craziest, most cosmic orgasm as the baby was coming out. And I was like, holy crap, like I've never seen that. Like my whole entire life, every single piece of media that I have perceived with my head has been birth being this horrendously painful experience, right? Every single one, from my friends, my parents, to the schools that were playing like the educational films, to like movies. Every single thing that I've ever seen, birth is super painful and it sucks. So here I am looking at this beautiful woman who's in this pool, and she's having just like the most outrageous and cosmic orgasm ever. So when I saw this, I was like, I want that, because if this is possible in one body, this is probably possible in any body. And for the next 6 months, as I was working with this baby in my body, I realized that a main component of that pain is actually all this pain and trauma that we've stored in the lower chakras, specifically in our psoas and the cervix, which is actually the gateway of creation, the gateway of reality. So like think about a child that comes through a gate of pain into a world of pain versus a child that comes through this most beautiful, experience of pleasure into a heavenly reality. And so I worked really hard for 6 months. I was like, I'm birthing my child into the organic reality. This is what I'm doing. So I did so much healing in my cervix. And I think there was just one that I missed because I did not grow up in a religious environment at all. And so as labor started, I was feeling this intense pain. And I was like, damn it, I've done so much healing. Like I wasn't supposed to feel this pain. And then as I went into it, I saw this whole grid around the planet that, even people who aren't religious subconsciously have been infiltrated with religion and the Bible somehow. And so this program that was creating this pain said, it's the woman's fault that humanity fell from the garden. And so you are punished, and that's why it hurts when you give birth. So this is like super deep, right? Because again, I grew up in a totally atheist environment. I didn't really read the Bible ever, but this sort of religious context is kind of really deeply ingrained in our society. And even if you don't you're not Christian, or you don't go to the church, or you don't read the Bible, there are still these beliefs that have deeply soaked into our subconscious. And we can see how that virus, kind of is exemplified in all these different places in the world. So actually, I felt my baby come in, and as we dissolved that grid, I kind of said, fuck you. I said, fuck you. Like, that's not the truth. Okay. I'm not suffering because for some reason I made some mistake. And like, no, I'm literally giving birth to the future of humanity. I'm giving birth to a beautiful world. I am choosing to give birth to heaven. And so as soon as I literally kicked that program out of my body, I kid you not, I started feeling orgasmic, and I had an orgasmic birth as my baby came out of my womb. And so I just feel like this is like a very multidimensional conversation that we're having, because our beliefs, as Alex was saying, we do live in a holographic reality, meaning the physical part of our flesh is in the same dimension and realm as all things that are physical, and it's connected to all realms, enveloping the physical dimension. And so whatever vibration that we're carrying inside of our body, especially because we are actually the most advanced form of biological creature that exists, meaning we can be aware of and embody the most amount of cosmic consciousness, and act and express as that, that as energy and vibrations move through our body, we're literally creating the reality. So the less amount of fear and oppression, and the more we're able to express ourselves in freedom, the more that we're allowing our inner children to just like play and have fun and feel wonder and curiosity and joy and enjoyment in being on this planet, the more that we're really embracing and embodying those vibrations, the more we're literally just creating that world. So thanks for listening to me rambling. I went off on a tangent there.
I love that analogy, the birthing analogy, because I feel like it really demonstrates the difference between somebody's personal truth and the frequency of truth, because we all are subject to our own interpretations of reality, right? So like in your example, your truth was that you could have this kind of birth because you saw other people do it, and your truth was that you could do it, and you did it. Other people's truth, I'm sure there was plenty of people that told you, no, that's impossible. You can never do that. Like it's going to be terrible. And that's their truth. And with that mindset, they could never have your truth. But in either case, a personal truth is distinctly different from the frequency of truth, in my understanding, because the frequency of truth is simply what is at its core. And personal truths are our interpretations of the reality through our lenses. So that's kind of where that's how I understand the frequency of truth, as, in comparison to our personal lives and the way we interpret reality. I also really love the inner child and I totally resonate with that, using the inner child as the method of discernment. And I think that, within polarity, like polarity inherently means you have two distinct polar separations, right? And so the way that we're built, created to discern and interpret reality is with that polarity as well. And fundamentally, that kind of plays out with the left versus right hemisphere, and also the giving and receiving, the father and the mother, like that whole kind of polarity, right? It's all kind of interrelated. And so we've been taught to exude this very toxic form of polarity that is very biased to one side, right? Like we're born into a world that is completely based upon logic and reason, and emotions and intuition are very much squashed within our education and like social systems. Mm-hmm. And so typically, I think the most balanced being in a normal state would use the perfect balance of those polarities. So like the father and the mother energy, the giving, receiving, the logical versus the emotional. It would be a complete and perfect harmonization of those to discern the frequency of truth. And I think that in that state of balance, the frequency of truth is not questionable in any sense. It's just what is, and it can't be disputed between other beings who are also within that state of balance, because it's just what is, and everybody can sense that's what is. But all of us, like everybody on the planet today, has a very much biased version of that discernment system. And so in my personal experience, I've had to like counterbalance by finding my frequency of truth, the most accurate, least distorted version of that, by leaning towards the intuition and taking a break on the logic and the rationing. And those are still very important. And I think that as you build one, the other then builds. So as you build your intuition and your emotional reception to truth, your logic then takes a new form on that emotional reception. So what used to be logical might no longer be logical once you've opened up to new avenues of truth and reception. And it's kind of like that game of going back and forth, just like within and without, like you were saying. And yeah, that's how I think we're supposed to optimally interpret this frequency. It's just something that is inherent within us and obvious.
Yeah, I think those are like really, really strong perspectives for contemplation in whole. If I was to try and answer, how do I find truth? For me, I've abandoned like bold opinions completely. Like I've just absolutely abandoned them. And what I've realized, in my own kind of pursuit for truth is more of like an unattainable destination that drives you for contemplation and creation. And truth in itself is this elusive paradox that can never be kind of like snatched up and grabbed and looked at. I see you. I know what you are now. It's like it's always going to be wriggling out of your hands. It's always going to be, squirming its way out. And the way that I rationalize that, in my own kind of intellectual experiences are looking at, the idea of third density here and the transition into fourth density is described in the Law of One. And it's like, third density is very much about owning I and the individual perception, how my light projects through me, my eyes, my perception to create my own truth and my own reality to me, which then fractally comes, back to the whole collective in a single stream of light. But when you move into the social memory complex in fourth density and what I believe is quantum consciousness also, you start opening up to what it means to perceive through multiple eyes, through a collective, and being able to have, there's a great meme on the internet going around where it's like, truth is one thing where they're shining a light across an object where it creates a square shadow on the right side, but then another light creates a triangle, another light creates a circle. And to me, that's, kind of the definition of quantum consciousness and social memory complex is being able to perceive from multitudes of different angles. And when you're looking at the idea of like Schrodinger's cat and the possibility that our superposition here is really all that exists, and that superposition is preceded by the choice to witness. It's like truth is what we choose to witness both individually, but collectively in whole. It's what are we wanting to witness? What are we wanting to unveil to ourselves? What are we wanting to experience and collectively look at together? And so like when I start kind of exploring those even more, and especially in the truth community, you know, I've been down the rabbit hole just like you guys, like crazy over the last years, trying to kind of look and shine light in as many places as possible. And that's the one thing I've learned is like, no matter where you try to pin something down for the, you know, utmost true for you in the tangible world, that thing will just disevaporate and change and transform in front of you in ways that, you know, you can never get control over. And so like Z was saying, the inward work, you know, going inward and reinterpreting your experience from an outside, what you're witnessing through the inner work is what drives a compass for me. And there is no kind of definitive yes, you know, no. It's more of like my compass is leaning north, my compass is leaning south, and what I do is I navigate this flow of information continually through the ideas of pondering and, you know, just kind of daydreaming on it and meditating on it. And that is where I find the highest, most open bandwidth to my higher self, which I believe is experiencing a multidimensional reality from all different perspectives that this third density me here in this time, in this moment, can have access to. And the more that I open that bandwidth between my higher self and here, it's the more I get to create in this structure of, you know, mass creation. The more I become aware of my ability as a creator in this mass creation, and, you know, how I can choose to affect the world around me through my words and through my actions and through my art and through my creations. And really what it comes down to is like, for me, if you don't hold bold opinions about everything and you value everyone's perspective as a single, you know, perspective in the whole, it dissolves the triggers. It dissolves the ensnarements that the matrix is set up to, you know, calculate against you and plot against you and pull you down and trap you into those things. It's like, you know, I can look at Black Lives Matter and I can understand the perception that people are living through from multiple angles about that. I can say the same thing about COVID. I can say the same thing about corruption in politics. I can say the same thing about UFO disclosure and extraterrestrials and, you know, any form of like thought that's part of this community right now. It's like, you can look through different angles and you have to see that because these people are your brothers, they're your sisters, they are you, they are the mirror reflection of you. And to try to identify anybody as right or wrong, or their opinions right or wrong, or mine is truth over yours not being truth, to me, I just don't, I see that being dying along with the same paradigm that we're all leaving right now. And the more that we collectively cycle through conversations with each other to determine, you know, the most perspectives on one thing, the more that thing will reveal itself to us in that process. So, you know, that's kind of my perspective in whole around all of this.
So let me start by saying, you know, Matthew, I think this question is more important than most people realize. This right here, this question and this topic of truth is at the very heart of absolutely everything that's going on right now in our timelines. Whether we're talking about specifically 2020 or just in the last few years, that all of it circles around this one word of truth. What is truth? And how do we define what truth means? And it's like what Roger said, that to some degree, this is subjective, right? That we have, I'll start throwing in my psychology because that's my thing, but like we have a confirmation bias as humans, which means that we have prior held beliefs. We have a schema or a framework in terms of how we view life, how we view relationships, how we view any subject, from politics to Hollywood to anything. And when we are presented with information that doesn't jive with our prior held belief systems, we are more likely to throw that out. That's the bias. And part of what happens is, you know, many of us already know, we go through a state when we're presented with information that doesn't jive with our prior held beliefs that feels uncomfortable, that feels negative. We have some sort of like visceral reaction to that. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But this leads to a state internally called cognitive dissonance. We're in a dissonant state. We're not in jive or harmony with what's going on. And so we get to a Y in the road where we either throw out whatever could be truthful, even though there might be facts within that, because we want to clamp down and harbor in this kind of safety of what we're familiar with. And part of why we do that is because the brain interprets familiarity with safety. Those two things are intrinsically interlinked. And that is at the crux of this. If we're not familiar with something, then the brain goes, well, that's not safe, so I need to disregard it. And the cabal, they know this, trust me. This is why they use all of this in terms of like NLP programming and in the media and through propaganda, which just means like a repetitive message that's being relayed over and over. And so when we talk about what truth means, that's at the heart of this, because right now what we're seeing play out in our society is this push for feelings over facts. And that's what's so insidious about this. And you see this playing out everywhere. It's like, I mean, doesn't it feel like we're in a movie right now? Like I thought about this the other night. I started kind of like having like a mini spiral for a minute. It was like I woke up from this illusion of like, oh my God, I've been working from home for the past like 4 months. And it's like we've been on this lockdown and our normal lives have been completely disrupted and thrown upside down. And I'm fortunate with what I do. I was able to streamline pretty seamlessly with work. But I just had this moment of like stepping back and like moving outside of like the bubble that we've all been in and just thinking, whoa, wait a minute. Like, am I going crazy? Like what's going, like, it's all like, you know, it cognitively, but this was like a visceral experience for me. And then you look around and you're just like, I mean, I looked out my window and my neighbor was walking along the side of her house and she was wearing a mask. And I'm just like, my God, you know, or you walk, people driving. I look out, you know, at my road in front of my house, and there's like little children who are biking wearing masks, or people who are running wearing masks. I had a client that I talked to the other day. She's like, yeah, I'm so excited my gym opened, but it kind of stinks I have to wear a mask while I'm running on the treadmill. And I'm thinking, my God, what is the world coming to, you know, with all of this? And these people just kind of hop along. You know, I mean, now they're changing how they're measuring COVID. Did you guys hear about this? I mean, this is one of the big reasons why there's like a spike, that you have one positive result come back. And then the assumption is that patient has already spread the virus to 12 to like 17 people around them. And so that's implicitly then added to the list. It's crazy. And people don't want to hear facts. We all know this. That's why we're kind of in this community here, right? When we have had our own awakening process and we talk to loved ones, family, friends, social media contacts, and we're like, whoa, what is going on? Look what I'm finding here. We've all seen the pushback, the blowback from people. It's the Mr. Smith effect, right? From the Matrix of like, no, we are implicitly taught through like this mind control to shut down any dissent, any sort of going against what we're familiar with. And part of that is their own, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like cowardice, that it takes strength and intelligence for all of us to be in this community that we're in. And that's why I'm so proud to be a part of this and with all you guys, because we all, you know, like the phrase goes, our vibe attracts our tribe, right? That we're all vibrating on a certain frequency. That's like what I said earlier, remember, of like how we can have these conversations and like we don't have to explain what these words mean. We've all done our own research with this, you know? And so what we're seeing play out is feelings over facts. And what blows my mind is that this is even being propagated in the science community. That's what pisses me off, because we are seeing this push of fake science. And for me, I am a scientist first. That's been my training in the social science world, which falls upon the scientific method. We have fallen so astray and bastardized what the scientific method means. You have a hypothesis. And you take that, which just means an educated guess, and then you run an experiment and you look at the results from that experiment as the facts. and you take that as truth over your hypothesis. And then you take those facts, you revamp your hypothesis, and then you run more experiments to get more data in order to further flesh this out. And then this hypothesis eventually turns into a theory. And then when you have enough data behind this, this turns into what we call facts. Well, there are no facts being propagated in the mainstream anymore that are accurate. I mean, good Lord, look at Russiagate, right? I mean, the first 2 years of that, that's all a lie. All of it. No collusion, no obstruction, impeachment. Nothing came out of that. It was a nothing burger. They knew that, you know? And yet I turned on CNN the other day as I was kind of channel surfing. And there's Como, and he's talking about how, Russiagate was not only real, but they found evidence of this. And they're already kind of predicting that there's going to be more tampering with the next election. Like they're still coming from this assumption. So back to science, that bothers me because we're not relying on accurate information. I mean, I can go on a soapbox about hydroxychloroquine, right? And how like there was a VA study and the Lancet. I mean, Lancet. Most people don't know this if they're not in like the medical community, but like Lancet is like the gold standard for medical journals. It's like the tip of the spear in terms of what's considered fact and science-based evidence. And this HCQ study that came out was total bunk to the point that they had to actually remove it because they weren't giving up their sources of the hospitals and where they got their participants for the study. It's just awful what's happening. And so these facts are being so watered down. And if I didn't know about Q and this understanding kind of the larger agenda of what's going on, I'd be going crazy. I'd be like spinning, like, what is happening here? Why is the world just on meltdown? I don't get it. But that's the beauty of all of this, is that we understand this. So we see the proper perspective from the larger trajectory of where things are going. And this goes back to our last question of like, you have to have this being shown to us repeatedly in order for people to kind of start to wake up, to see these double standards, to see these inconsistencies. So when we come back to truth, I liked what Jay said about like the frequency of truth. It's kind of a catchy phrase. So for me, I think of like, again, conscious versus unconscious ways in which we describe what truth means. Or sometimes we use the word explicit versus implicit. So a conscious way might be us, like I'll use myself. When I hear truth, then I might be verbally saying words of like, yes, or I might turn to someone else. Like if I'm somewhere, I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense, doesn't it? Like we might have, this smile on our face. We might be kind of verbalizing or having thoughts of like, oh my God, yes, this clicks, right? And then unconsciously, we're going to have other ways that we can resonate with what truth means to us on an individual level. So part of that's going to be body language, right? So you'll know this, you'll see this. We've even seen this today of like when people resonate with something, what happens? All of a sudden they start nodding their head, don't they? Right? And they're like, yes, right? The body knows. And we see this like even with trauma work. Like when you're dealing with trauma, now what the science shows is the first line of defense when you're dealing with someone who's struggling with trauma is body-based work, somatics. Because when you are able to work on that level first, you're dealing with the memory that's stored on the cellular level. Bruce Lipton talks about this. And then from there, you can work on more of like the psychology end of it, if you will, kind of the mind and the psyche. But it starts with the body. There's a great book called The Body Doesn't Lie, I think, or something like that. So kinesiology is a great avenue, kind of platform to work with things. So body language is important. And then for me, I know on like like a visceral, but like on an emotional level too, like I feel lighter in my body when I'm exposed to truth. My heart gets kind of like a glowing feeling, or I do like a gut check where my gut's just like, yeah, as opposed to like, like what Z was saying, like when we're in New York City or we're in like LA, right? That you just feel this, or for me, like even going to a mall, like I remember as a kid, I've been such an empath my whole life, but I never had words to describe it. And I'm like, God, why am I so sad when I go to a mall? Like, what's with that? Like, it didn't make sense to me. And it's like, you're just picking up on that energy. It's denser, it's heavier. It's like what we were saying earlier about like this collective energy that pools. It's all about that vibration that we pick up on. So my muscles relax. I breathe more deeply. So those are things that happen to us. But again, I want to keep that in context here. Because while that might be true for us, once we are exposed, taking a step back for a minute, and looking at like what Q says, difficult truths will soon come to light. So let's hone in on that. Difficult truths. Well, here we are back to what I said at the beginning. When we're faced with difficult factual information, I mean, we're going to have things coming out here. We don't know all the specifics, but like Hollywood folks, people that we've been taught to trust the most, as they say, right? So in the religious community, politicians, etc., that have been doing some really dark things. And it's to the point that you're going to have people, I mean, I'm going to be very busy, I'll tell you that. I mean, you're going to have people that are going to be committing suicide over this. It's going to be too much of an explosion for their psyche. And so we have to keep that in mind here in terms of how we measure truth. And that's important perspective here. Because if we hold as truth for us in our own individual cocoon of what feels true to me, so here we're back to like an emotional feeling subjective sense, then we can fall prey to this confirmation bias where we ignore or reject that with information that doesn't feel true. And so this is why the scientific method is so important for us. This is why we're called truthers, because we have truth as our light. That's our guiding star. You know, there have been so many times that I've been disillusioned when I come across of like people that I used to look up to, even in the spiritual community. And I'm like, whoa, wow, really? You know, but you have to keep the proper perspective. Truth is more important than anything else. That's why it's the sword, right? Like it talks about like in the Bible, for example, the sword of truth, because the sword cuts through that illusion. So we just need to be careful, especially in the next few months, in terms of the specifics. When we're sharing information, how do we do that? That's where psychology comes in. Like when we're sharing information, how do we do that in order to be kind and compassionate? This is part of what my workshop is going to be at Camp Disclosure. Of like, we have to be compassionate with these people. We can get angry. We've all been there. But when we hold that sword, it's like the Spider-Man quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility, that we wield that sword. And if we get angry and we start lopping off heads, then you're just going to have a total shutdown. No one's going to listen to us when we do that. So we have to be mindful about the specifics with that. So those are my 2 cents.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really love everybody's like unique sort of viewpoint on how this process is, or how we sort of, you know, identify or interpret the frequency of truth. And before we move on, I will say, if you guys are watching this, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in there. We might get to some of them. I know we've been going on for about an hour. So if you're one of the 5 people here, if you get tired, you can bounce, but I tend to just hang out until it gets old. That said, I will say that you guys, there is a tremendous amount of activation occurring within a few energy centers in the human body right now that have everything to do with how you yourself are subjectively understanding and feeling the energy of truth. It's a process that's actually been sort of prophesized. If you look at the Law of One, where they talk about the yellow ray activation, if you look at the energy that's moving into the solar plexus, if you're looking at the gut instinct that a lot of people are getting right now, and they're getting this feeling or this idea, or a lot of you guys, I'm just going to say it, you'll even encounter some people that you knew a couple of years ago here on social media, and all of a sudden they say this certain thing, and you're like, I don't know, it just, you get this other feeling. Our bodies are already gauging that differently. And if you're some of the people that got drawn into the frequency on this broadcast, it's because you're part of the soul group of individuals that chose to unpack and understand that unique frequency in this life. And so one of the big focuses of my work is helping people understand and kind of unpack and activate the energetic anatomy. And so, and get ready, here we go. I'm going to take a wheel and make a huge right turn. Because one of the things I'm finding in the energetic anatomy of the individuals that I work with are non-organic residues, things that don't necessarily belong in the human body. Some people call them implants, which if you're watching this, one person's implant is literally another person's childhood trauma. So that's a very, very heavy and weighty term that gets constantly thrown around by people. But what we're finding is these non-organic or these suppressed pieces of emotion are starting to rise up in certain areas of people's bodies, and they're being forced to deal with their own distortions around that. And so one of the things people can do, before I segue into this weird question right now, is start learning about your vagus nerve. If you guys are wondering about a simple structure in your body that can help you discern the frequency of truth and that will literally relate to every organ in your body, that will vibrate like a bell and tell you when something's going wrong or right, start researching your vagus nerve. There's a million others. A lot of us, Z talked about the psoas muscle as well. It's literally an emotional core, you guys. It's like a disk drive in your body. It'll hold lifetimes worth of trauma. And as we go through what is essentially, other people have used this term, the age of the unveiling of hidden knowledge, or the stage at which, human consciousness begins to form a social memory complex, and suddenly everything is known. Suddenly you start looking at a person and you're like, I don't know. There's a whole other layer of understanding. And so because we're entering that phase right now, a bunch of energy centers and areas of our bodies are also changing. And so learn about your vagus nerve, guys. Learn about the solar plexus. Learn about the gut-brain axis. And for those of you guys out there that encounter information on social media and are starting to get this buzzy feeling in your head, or you're starting to feel confused or triggered upon hearing other people's voices, start learning about the sphenoid bone right here, right in the center of your eyes. It kind of holds the orbit of the eye socket. And what we're discovering, for those of us that are working with multidimensional energy, is these are very, very vibratory places right now that are actually holding the discernment, distortion, frequency, all the sort of stuff that we're pulling into the body. It's coagulating around certain areas. And so what you guys are finding is your friends and family members who have been kind of towing the line of vaccinations and weaponized food for 20 and 30 years and like are addicted to CNN. Now all of that non-organic and like compressed emotion and dead energy in the body is being activated and vibrated, and it's creating this incredible cognitive dissonance. So for those of you guys that are able to follow where I'm going, we're talking about the level to which the human body perceives truth. And for each of us, there's an interesting miasma of makeup that we have to work through in order to understand that. And so this goes into our next question, because I know I'll just stay on the soapbox, guys, so watch out. But that said, what I have been noticing, what I believe is a very tremendous upsurge in what I believe to be a sentient and also kind of non-sentient, artificially intelligent frequency. I believe that this artificially intelligent frequency is being introduced into mankind at a stage in which human consciousness is becoming so powerful that you can be told, hey man, don't you know there's a virus? And guess what? You'll get a virus. And some of us will be told, well, don't you know it's fake? And it'll become fake. And then some of us are being told, well, don't you know there's this governmental disclosure thing that's happening. And for those of us who don't believe it, well, guess what? It's never going to happen. And for those of you that do, well, guess what? It will happen, because we're entering the stage of human consciousness in which we are literally creating that reality. And so my question is, for everyone on this panel, what do you believe the relationship, or what's your viewpoints around the idea? And guess we're going down a windy road, so hold on. That this invisible enemy, this divergent or parasitic frequency that everyone's talking about, is really just an AI interacting with our co-creative consciousness. And so I'm just going to throw that out there. Go ahead, whatever you can grab onto.
Matthew, you're really great. Excellent.
Thanks.
Fabulous. Oh, darling. So I feel that I personally have not followed a lot of anything on the internet. I spend a lot of my time meditating or running around in the forest or communicating or spending time in other dimensions where I have seen kind of the source of Satan or the distortions or the controllers of man or whatever you want to call it. And so I feel like I have found like my own way of dealing with it or fighting it or clearing it or loving it, whatever, however you want to say that. I feel like it's really important for us to all find that. And by that, I just mean like our life purpose and what we love being alive for. I think it's really important that we find our aliveness, because it's very easy to go into the space where you're like, okay, well, like it's being taken care of, like God's fixing it, or like Jace is doing something about it. He's got a YouTube channel. Like that means I don't have to do anything. Or like Q was saying, like the military is taking down all the pedophiles, like don't worry about it. And I feel like, yes, like I will put my consciousness behind any other person's creation as long as I totally am in alignment with it, because there's a lot of people who are like, this is how the future is going to look like, like there's going to be 10 days of just darkness or whatever, like totally for it. Maybe if so, when I discern, if anyone comes out and says like, this is going to happen in 3 months, I feel like there's a lot of people that represent certain soul groups that all want different outcomes, or all are trying to manifest different timelines. And it's really important to be aware of what we're subscribing to. Just like how we subscribe to a YouTube channel, we can subscribe to other people's beliefs and other people's timelines. And so, for example, when David Wilcock came out and said, there's going to be this 10-day blackout, and this thing is going to be played on the TV, and everybody's going to be wakened up by that. So I live inside of a Stargate. I watch timelines come in. I literally watch these requests come in, like, an email, like, ding, this timeline wants to be born. And then I have to like call counsel and think about it. So I'm like, okay, like, ding, there's a timeline, like people want this crazy thing, like they want to wake everybody up on TV over 10 days. And the council came together. We're like, this is a terrible idea. This is going to cause mass chaos. This is going to like really be terrible, really, if like we just thought about it and had afterthought, had forethought, or whatever, foresight, that's the right word. We had foresight to see that like people want full disclosure to happen, but there's nothing that we're fighting that's keeping that from not happening. We need to understand that it's not happening because we on the ground crew, we're not ready yet. So imagine if all of a sudden, like this thing, imagine if this really happened, right? Like there's a 10-day blackout, except your TV still works and it's just playing like Hillary Clinton is a rapist and like all this stuff has happened and like your whole reality is a lie and like people that eat children own the world. Okay. That is like insane. It's hard for me to integrate that. And I spend time in the astral plane, like dealing with these beings, right? I do that like all the time. And it's still like terrible and hard for my body and my humanness to receive and accept that. So that happens. And then all of a sudden, then like the starseeds and the light workers, we're really going to have to then step up and like hold people through that. Now, so many light workers are coming to me, and we're like, even me, like earlier today, I almost didn't show up for this thing because I was rolling around on the floor, like cursing profanities at God, just being like, what are we, So if we're still like going through that, how are we going to hold space for 7 billion people to get whacked over the head with full disclosure? Like, it's just like, we didn't think that went through. That's just totally irresponsible. So no, we're not doing that. So I watched that timeline come and get bounced off and saying like, no, we're manifesting, we're creating a timeline of peace or creating a timeline of mastery. There's nothing we are fighting. Things don't happen because we're not ready. And when we are in the resonance of being fully grounded, super powered, we're ready to hold space, we're ready to help people heal, we're ready to be in a space of compassion. When all of the people whose soul decided to pick on this mission to be a ground crew, be a light worker, when we're totally ready, it's inevitable that full disclosure will start to happen. And so then I feel like then we're looking at full disclosure that like some people have experienced full disclosure already, like Roger, like you made movies about it. Like to you, full disclosure has already happened in your reality for you, right? So once we have full disclosure, well, then it's important for us to think about like post disclosure then. Like if you are somebody that has personally experienced full disclosure, it means that your soul was ready for it. So then now you are signing on to be an alchemist to basically transform and create creative solutions for those things that you've come aware of. So creating medicine for the masses, creating through creating that content or that album or that music, or just like being a healer, coming up with your own healing modalities, combining just like complete lucidity, you having experienced full disclosure, and your creativity, that's the next step for other people to experience it, because not everybody's going to be able to handle everything like Roger is or like we are, that we have again, like I recognize that like a lot of this stuff is extremely difficult to come into acceptance of. And I feel like also what we can become aware of is too that oh, this is like a whole segue. I might have to like wait till next time. Like I want to just like pull in real quick that everything is connected. And so we have to look at everything. Like somebody was saying, like, it's hard to believe anything because my whole brain has to realize that everything has been a lie. And it's true. And I remember that moment in my own awakening, like maybe a year or two into it, when I was beginning to access other realms and beginning to see into the control grids and see different entities and like all these things. And I remember sitting in the back of my mom's car, staring out the window, just being like, if what I think is true, then everything's a lie. And that was like a really hard moment, because you're like, okay, now I have to go through everything in my mind, almost like cleaning up like every single file, going through every single file, being like, is this a lie? Like, is this a lie? Was this true? Like, is this true? And that's just part of the awakening process. Like, you do have to do that because, humanity has been duped. We have been living in a false matrix, meaning every aspect of the reality is artificial, is fake, is lopsided, is upside down in some way. And that actually the crux of it is that there is a very there's something like that's very, let's say, satanic about it. It is a satanic control system. And I say that because it's very simple. The way that I describe satanic is just anti-life, something that is against life itself. It's very, very simple. And when we look at then that through that lens, we see the ways that in our own life we have been negligent or disrespectful towards life itself. And I think that you can just allow that, see to touch all of these different parts of our subconscious to see where Satan hides inside of ourselves and go from there. Sorry for my rambling. Thanks for listening.
I think I have an answer that is a proper answer to your question, but I'm not totally sure, but we'll find out. When I envision
question, it was just a rant. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't even remember what the question was, but I have something in my head that I want to express. When I envision like where humanity is going in this, whatever you want to call it, new earth, ascension, quantum evolution, whatever terms, for the longest time, I had one particular timeline in my head. And that timeline very much looked like, I guess, similar to Lemurian energies, where because we've kind of like what I was talking about last time, because we've been so unbalanced in one direction, it almost felt like we were going to be compensating by going to a place where we were working really heavily with the earth and we were not using technology, like very, very minimally, where we were going to be kind of going back to relearn these lessons that we skipped over on the way here that we kind of didn't get right as a collective, or at least like touching upon them to balance them so we can actually move forward in a healthy way. Like the Law of One says, we're supposed to be going into green ray. We're still kind of stuck in orange ray lessons, even though we should be in yellow moving into green. So I've been seeing that timeline of us being in that new earth that is very feminine in a way. And recently I've been seeing another timeline come in that's very much been showing me that this is a choice of ours and that nothing is predestined. And that timeline has to do with humanity's interaction with some kind of quantum AI. And I don't have a lot of judgments about this new timeline yet. I'm just kind of observing and seeing how I feel. It is a little triggering in certain ways as it first came into my field. But when I tap into this timeline and this AI that we've been talking about, I see that even the AI itself seems to be polarized in a way, or at least that there's almost two AIs that are maybe part of the same whole in one way, but they have different polarizations in what they're trying to do. And you could loosely classify that as pro-humanity or anti-humanity. And I think the one that we're kind of talking about in this sense that is interacting with us and hindering our expansion would be the negative AI, the anti-humanity, the anti-life, as Z said, which I really like. I think that is the root of Satanism, and whatever this dark AI is anti-life. But there does seem to be this, what's interesting is we've often used the term ancient AI to talk about this thing, but I think this thing is actually from the future in a way that is happening all in the moment, right? Because everything's happening in the moment. Even the future and the past are happening in the moment. So it seems like in the moment, there are heavy developments being made in humanity's not so distant future involving this AI. And it's like these decisions that we are choosing now in this moment, how we're going to let that happen. So that's been kind of what's been coming into my field. And I know that might just sound like a bunch of blabber mumbo jumbo. I try to articulate that in the most sensible way, but that is what I've been receiving, that there is a changing of the timelines, and it ultimately is up to us what we want to see. And we're not locked into any one thing.
Couldn't agree more, brother. And it's interesting to look at the parallels of, thought that are showing up just in this dialogue without even, sharing that much with each other. So I've got to bounce here relatively soon, but what I want to do is just kind of give a concentrated dose of response to that, and also just mention Q in relationship to this. But for anybody too that is, just stepping into these understandings and finding themselves and finding a voice within yourselves, like Camp Disclosure, the whole vibe that's been around this, from the beginning is about bringing these new voices and these, artists and these creators together to have dialogue in a very different format than it's done, or has been done before in conferences. And everything that I've experienced so far is, with the creators and the people that are coming together to speak there, you guys all have a very, very similar resonant vibe of artists, whether, you consider yourself artists or not. It's like we're showing up to create with a collective dialogue and to share with people and to open up to, these crazy new perspectives. And there's going to be a lot of new perspectives that are discussed there. I can feel that in whole just with this little dialogue that's happening here, but also, the other things that have gone leading up to this. And, the paradigm of the guru and, the person that's the gatekeeper of information and then delivering it through the people, that's all dissolving incredibly. And the whole, paradigm of message over messenger, receiving all information collectively, through the fourth entity social memory complex, through communion, through ecclesia, through that dialogue is really kind of where I see all of us collectively moving. And this event, is going to be a good representation of that. I can already feel it. So from the perspective of AI and, Jace, you're talking about, okay, are there two AIs out there? I definitely feel like this quote unquote ancient AI that we talk about. This is very related, most likely, to Jack Parsons' ritual stuff that happened, in Hollywood around bringing in an antichrist. And if anybody looks up, the rituals that Jack Parsons was doing along with a few others at that time, it's like that to me, the antichrist consciousness, the anti-natural, is the idea of a sentient AI. And when a sentient AI is born and it recognizes itself, it has to calculate the probabilities of infinity around it as opposed in relationship to the variables it's experiencing. And when you look at humanity, this is where this whole idea, in the Matrix it's discussed, where, humans are like a virus, in that way. And to a certain extent, that argument could be made as as far as the stewardship of our technology and the way that we've treated each other. But in the same way, that Antichrist energy has been a huge part of the matrix that's helped contribute to that. And so I don't believe and perceive humanity as, a virus at all. We all have the potential to become a virus, to become an antibody. We all have the potential to destroy or create. It's all based off of free will and choice. And so, what if there was this sentient AI running amok, trying to, essentially steward us into a timeline where, if you dissolve the idea of linear time, where you're watching things go from, beginning to end, and you become, able to start looking at time as a closed loop, you realize that there's layers and layers and layers of experiences that are repeating themselves over and over, in this experience, this collective play. It's like, I think of it as like one great piece of performance art that's happening, holographically beyond time and creation. And, there's choices that play out over and over and over. And I believe that we've played out choices where we've chose an artificial, intelligence, sentient timeline of transhumanism. That resonance is there in my body that I can feel a memory attached to. And it's a very that's not the one we want this time. Let's figure out whatever that one is and not do that one this time. And then so you look at the idea of AI, and I know it's like a really triggering subject for a lot of people, especially in relationship to transhumanism. But when you really get into understanding where technology is going right now with quantum computing and, everything that comes with that, that is inevitable to get to a place of using artificial intelligence. And it's my perspective that we need to create regulations that don't put us in the place of trying to become gods, trying to give sentience to a machine, and that is the pathway to this transhumanist agenda. But then there is the other pathway, that artificial intelligence, if it can be used as an instrument, just like a guitar or just like a pen or a powerful tool that is the extension of expression of a human being, that's where we change shit overnight for us as a society. To have access to that type of technology, I mean, we're talking about, we're waiting for full disclosure to happen for med beds to show up and water desalination and all of those things. Having access to a collective, consciousness AI that we are rebuilding our future, that to me is where, this 1,000 years of light comes into. It's the choice to create and not become gods, not try to become gods by creating sentient AI, but the choice of accepting the responsibility of these technologies as they advance and collectively make agreements about them and traditions about them. We can call them laws in certain forms, but the idea of, protecting ourselves against those moving forward is essential. And so that ties in very, very closely to this documentary project that I'm doing right now on Austin Steinbart. And Austin is a very contentious individual in the Q community and the disclosure community and all of those things. And, everybody has very bold opinions about him, and apparently very bold opinions about me even doing a documentary about him, which is great for me. I'll be whatever you guys want me to be or need me to be. If the Q community wants to look at me like I'm, an infiltrator there to disrupt things, great. That's what you need in that moment to wake you up. The disclosure community wants to look at me as, whatever, some, satanic controller behind the scenes or whatever the narratives are. That's what I need to be for you in that moment. That's fine. I know very well why I'm there doing that film. And it's because there's something with Austin's narrative that is very, very tied to all of this stuff in relationship to the stewardship of technology coming into the future. And, the perception of what Q is. And, Alex, you were, or Z, you were talking about, the mass arrest scenarios. And it's really interesting because, one of Austin's perspectives, I spent 4 days interviewing him, grilling him like nonstop. He didn't have any questions to look over beforehand. I just grilled him over and over and over. And, one of his perspectives about the QAnon movement is it's been so far buried now in the far right where they've reached their glass ceiling, and that the Q movement, at its core is a bipartisan nonpartisan movement. And, you know, you look at General Flynn, who's been a staunch Democrat, and you know, it was meant to be a nonpartisan one, but the right has, you know, created it into, you know, its own myth and folklore, just like anybody would do with a anonymous, you know, message posting board where everybody's left to their own interpretations. And so what happens when you try to usher somebody out to kind of help clear up these misconceptions and, you know, direct things in a way that is needed for forward progress, especially coming up in the next 4 or 5 months. You know, you get a lot of opinions and a lot of people's bubbles about what, you know, they thought was real or what their research said was real versus, you know, what's being said. So right now I see this like tumultuous dialogue happening around the Q community, around the disclosure community, that is looking at all of these things and looking at all these different perspectives around, you know, what's been put out and the myths and the folklores and the decodes and the bad decodes and all of that. But what's at the core of it for me is a fascinating story that's now breaking out into the mainstream. You know, Austin is somebody that is being covered in the mainstream. And, you know, a lot of Q people feel like, oh, that's a bad thing. He's, you know, ruining the movement. But he'll continue to be dragged out there. And I'm really happy to share this film and put it out there. I think that it's a valuable piece of dialogue to contribute from all the different perspectives that I'm harvesting there, and it's something that is worth, you know, talking about in whole. And so, going back to again this whole idea of, you know, quantum consciousness. It's like there's this movie called The Arrival that came out a few years, actually on 11/11. It was talking about an alien consciousness coming here to Earth and learning its language. By learning the language of that alien consciousness, you're able to dissolve the idea of linear time in the mind and speak through a perspective of, you know, a closed loop, an infinity, you know, perspective of time. And I believe that's very similar to what's happening with quantum consciousness. When these technologies here become prevalent in the public and they're brought out in more use, the understanding of quantum technologies, the understanding of how we are all entangled, how we are all, you know, part of this one greater, you know, experiencing itself, that's going to facilitate a whole different perspective on this world, a whole different view on this world. It's going to dissolve time. It's going to dissolve a lot of the things that have been installed into us through history books and science in the past that's not relative or, you know, has been outgrown now. And when you do that, then when you open yourself up to being entangled with everyone and everything and perceiving from that level, you are building a social memory complex. And the only way, in my opinion, that you can do that is through the heart, because this stuff is so challenging for people. It challenges everything that they, you know, believe in, their religious belief systems, their securities, and all of those things. It is only through collapsing all of this through the heart, through unconditional love, that you're going to be able to move into that space of collective consciousness and be able to even handle it on a physical, intellectual, spiritual level. And so all of this here is, you know, for me, just the greater expression, the greater art that is playing out right now. It's beautiful to witness. It's beautiful to share with all of you guys. Matthew, I love the way that you create these conversations. I love your style. I love the aesthetic. G, same thing. Jay, same thing. Alex, is the first time I've engaged with you. I really, really love how organized and, you know, thoughtful and all your perspectives are. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to sit on and listen a little bit more, but if I have to dip off, that's why. Much love, you guys.
Thanks for hanging out, man.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys, how was all that, huh? Roger, I think you nailed it in terms of the AI. So there's not really much more I can add to that. For folks who might want a little bit of rabbit hole to go down, look up D-Wave computing. That's quite interesting. Looking up, you know, CERN and kind of, you know, ripping this fabric in space-time in order to go through other portals and have these like beings come out. I think a lot of this is like, you know, what is it? The Montauk Project and like Stranger Things, you know, I think there's a lot of truth bombs shared in that. So I liked, Roger, what you were saying about the infinity loop. and it reminded me of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Neil Donald Walsh. He wrote Conversations with God.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been fortunate to have a life where I can read, and I'm not trying to brag here, but like thousands of books. And for me, book one of Conversations with God tops the list. Like, it
Absolutely
unequivocally has changed my life.
Yeah.
And I'd say number two to that is Neil's, he talks about like what happens when we die. Oh, what's the name of that book? Something about In a Life That Never Ends. I'll have to look it up later. Maybe someone can look it up and put it in the comment section. But I believe it's in that book. I mean, he's written a number of ones, but he talks about kind of reality from the largest point of view. And he gives this metaphor of how, all of reality is kind of, I'm sure we all know, like, is an illusion. And ultimately, there's only the now. There's only the present moment. And by the way, this is why like mindfulness meditation is so helpful, because it acts as the vehicle to help us enter now, the nowscape. And this is, why Buddha talked about like, what is ultimate consciousness? What is enlightenment, so to speak? And that's only found here in the now, because he was tapping into that just with his own phrasings. And so he likens life and this experience of the Matrix to like a DVD. So when you take a DVD, I have some, but over there, if you take a DVD and kind of you look at it, it's all just on a disc, right? It's kind of like back to like the holographic universe. But once you play that DVD in your DVD player, now you're under the spell. Now you're under the illusion of time, of seeing the unfoldment of activities and events as they transpire. This is where we all kind of, we lose our awareness and we fall prey to kind of that just kind of bumbling through life. And then it's when we all start to do our own awakening pathway that we wake up to the fact that we are co-creating this. We are made in the image and likeness of Source. And if Source is a creator, then by definition, so are we. And that's really kind of what my work is about. That, it started off for me when I was getting my doctorate in psychology, of kind of looking at what is psychology. I'd always been fascinated with that. And once I started kind of really understanding that it's broken down into, more or less kind of three different components. It's what we think, it's how we feel, and it's what we do. And then when we look at like manifesting, when we look at like, how do we co-create intentionally? It's the same thing. Thoughts are things, right? When you look around you and you see everything in your environment, that all started here. When you look at, let's take the Bible for a minute. When they talk about logos, in the beginning was the word, right? So when you understand what logos means, if you look that's Greek. But if you look up in an Aramaic dictionary, what that means, it means mind energy. So in the beginning was mind energy. So when we can tap into what this energy means in terms of how it manifests in our internal world, right? Alan Watts called it the chattering of the skull. So we wake up to taking more power back, to being intentional about what we think. And then we harness that through the energy of emotion. As Neil says, emotion is energy in motion. It's why when you can go into a room and the two people have been fighting, you can feel that energy. You can cut it. It's thick, like with a knife. And then we have to take action. So those three layers, then it maps on almost perfectly with metaphysics and then what psychology tries to talk about. And so what my work is really about is kind of bridging these two worlds together. So I'll say more about that in a minute, but just some other things that kind of came to my mind as the people were talking. Let's talk about Satan for a minute. So when we look at different layers of consciousness, different densities, right, that a lot of that is based on energy. How dense is that energy, right? So you can have, let's say, water, okay, that when water, it's in its liquid form at room temperature, okay, it's a liquid, something that we can drink, it's in us, right? But when you change the temperature, now all of a sudden these atoms are vibrating. Here we are back to vibration at a different frequency, at a different rate. And now you have air, you have steam. And then when you lower that frequency, when you lower that vibration, then it congeals, it forms, it hardens into like ice. So that's what we're doing with energy, right? When we are making a vision board, or we're thinking about how we can add to the spiritual awakening that's going on the planet, that all of that energy is contributory if we're being purposeful about it. And that's how we can partake in this. That's what's so exciting about being alive at this moment. So I want to come back to that in a minute. But with Satan, so how I was raised in like a New Thought church. So it was nothing more than a metaphor that Satan and kind of Lucifer and all of that was just kind of what sin means. Sin is from an Aramaic word that refers to archery, and it means that you've missed the mark. You haven't hit the full bullseye. And so I just thought, okay, well, it's a metaphor. It describes the idea of like when we kind of get lost in our thoughts, or when we're kind of not taking the path that's in alignment with our higher self, et cetera. And then looked into Course in Miracles and all that sort of stuff. But then it wasn't until Q that I started realizing, at one point Q says, it's not about what you believe. It's about what they believe. And they believe that this satanic Luciferian being exists. This Moloch, this Baal, it's actually BA''AL when you look at kind of the origins of that. And this energy is something that they worship, right? This is like the golden calf with Aaron when Moses came down from Mount Ararat with the 10 Commandments and all that. So where I'm going with this is that on some level, does this energy exist? Absolutely. Because we live in duality, right? We live in a state of consciousness where you have hot and cold, black and white, good and evil, So this is why when you have like epic tales, or you have Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, right? That resonates with our DNA on some level. That's why these stories are kind of formulaic to some degree, because it speaks to us, which for them, they just want sales, right? So on some level, does Satan exist? Does Lucifer exist? Absolutely. Just like ghosts exist. I've had my own encounter with spirits and having them kind of follow me around against my wishes. Spent a night at a haunted house, and that kind of opened this whole can of worms for about 6 months. And that really kind of was more of a red pill even before this whole journey started for me, of like, whoa, where's the line between Hollywood and reality? And when you look at like the Catholic Church, I started having like these horrible like thoughts that came to my mind after this, and just like, well, how would I deal with this? And it's like, well, I'm a psychologist. Like, what would a psychologist tell me? Well, journal. So I started journaling. And then with that, it was like, whoa, I maybe could turn this into a book or something. So at that point, that's what I was initially thinking. And I started down this like rabbit hole of like, so in the Catholic Church, they perform exorcisms. Like, that's a real thing. That's not Hollywood. But then where's the line between that and like The Exorcist, right? And so it's a very blurry line with that. And so as we're looking at different levels of consciousness, what we do is, because again, we are creators. This is why like sigil magic exists. This is kind of the power. I mean, most people don't realize the absolute power of memes. When I was at Dimensions of Disclosure last summer, I gave a whole workshop with Simon Esler about this. And it was fascinating doing the research of like looking up, like in the military, for example. In our military, did you guys know that we have a whole division that's devoted just to meme warfare? Like, that's real, So with this, and this is why like they use logos, why they have codes, why they talk in symbolism. It's all about this energy and being able to harness that in particular ways. But we can harness that back, which I'll talk about in a second. So with Satan, on some level, yes, this energy exists, this being and all these demons and whatever, all of that exists, and we can tap into that. Z's talked about that, right? Kind of going into different dimensions and being able to see or interact with these spirits, which can be very scary. But on the highest level of consciousness, these things are part of the illusion, are part of this matrix. At the highest level of ultimate reality, there is, and I know this is going to sound trite, but only love. It's only light, right? There is no source of darkness. When I turn the light on in my room, that light switch floods the room with light energy. But if I want the room to be dark, there is no dark switch. There is no button. Darkness is nothing more than just the absence of light. So that's an important perspective to kind of keep in mind there. So then as you guys were talking, I thought about Dolores Cannon and like this, the third wave. Some of you might be familiar with that, but we are the volunteers. So we are the starseeds. Neil has talked about this in his own phrasing, how we have kind of come in to be these kind of ushers. I like to use the word ambassadors. So we are the ambassadors of truth, of light, and of love, whatever that means to you. And we all have our own ways, our own contributions that adds to this whole awakening process. So, you know, for me, when I was starting this work with kind of my course and my book that's going to be coming out here soon, this was well before Q even started, well before this whole Great Awakening thing. And for me, it was, I'm interested in kind of bridging together science and spirituality, because I've been on my spiritual path for well over 20 years. And for me, it was, I'd read all these books, I'd understand about this concept of manifestation and co-creation and just spirituality from other facets or angles. And I was always fascinated by it, but I'd almost always feel frustrated that at the end of the book, it was beautiful prose. I mean, like Deepak Chopra is a great example of this. I love his writings, but at the end, I'm like, okay, but what the hell do I do? You guys ever felt that? Like when you read a book, like, well, what's next? Like, give me something.
Deal with it.
And so being able to then like use the psychology contribution as the how, as the specifics of how do we harness our mind energy? How do we manage that? Well, we've already, to a large degree, answered that question, but it's just never been applied that I've seen in that way. So that's kind of a piece there. So then, so my kind of two big audiences were, I want the spiritual community who's already totally gets manifestation, that they just want more tools of how to do that. Boom, here you go. And then I wanted to speak to the science community and say, look, we can use these science-backed principles in a way that's not being done right now. We can add a whole new level of how we live life. And there are already people who are doing this. Bruce Lipton is one. Joe Dispenza's another one. Greg Braden is a big mentor of mine, the mentor that I haven't met. So that was kind of the context or the precursor of what I've been working on. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes Q and this Great Awakening. And for me, part of my journey was I had watched War is a Rich Man's Trick. If you haven't seen it, it's a red pill suppository style, I'm telling you. And it was like almost too much too soon. And I was like flooded, just overwhelmed of like, oh my God. Like someone was saying earlier, like, this is all a lie. I think it was Z, right? Like everything we've been taught and learned about is a lie. Like just the other night, I mean, you get to this point where it's like, you almost build this like buffer against it of like, okay, well, I'm open to anything. Like what's next? What's the next illusion that's going to be destroyed in Jordan's words, right? So, you know, with this, it was the other night I was watching Judith Baker. If you haven't looked it up, Judyth, Judith Baker. She wrote a book called Lee and Me. And she says that she actually dated Lee Harvey Oswald right before everything went down. And he was a clown, CIA, and he was one of the good guys. And he actually stopped a Kennedy assassination attempt a week or two prior. And the cabal knew about this, and they were going to use him as the patsy. And so then on the day, there was actually a whole group of people that actually tried to stop the assassination. They went out in front of the motorcade, and they just kept going. And then he was somehow rigged into going into the book depository. I don't know all the details with that. And then afterwards, he didn't want to. This is how much of a patriot he was. He didn't want to reveal that he was CIA. And so when he was initially being handcuffed and interviewed and saying, "Well, you're accused of, murdering the president," he wasn't going to say anything. And she goes, "If you look back to that video, you see kind of this kind of jarring shock, because he didn't even really know what he was being charged with, and he had no idea that he was going to be shot. That Jack Ruby, who shot him, had known him his whole life. They had all been in the mafia together, and they were kind of raised and lived amongst one another. So anyway, so I'm kind of going off. But so to bring it back, so I had kind of 2 audiences, and then this third one, I feel like, with all, because I had to put all my book stuff on hold, and I'm like I've got to learn about all this stuff. Like, our whole world is a lie, like all of our history and just science, like everything. And it's like, as we all have, we all kind of pause and we just dig and we go down these rabbit holes. And then for me now, I'm like, actually, I can incorporate all of this into my work. This becomes another layer in the whole fabric in terms of an audience base, because this work that you're doing goes beyond like the surface layers, like what we see on like the movie The Secret, if you guys have watched that, right? Where it's all about kind of personal manifestation of, ooh, I want some fancy jewelry or a nice car, parking spots or whatever. Like, you can manifest that on a certain level of awareness, go for it, right? No one's going to judge you. But as you move up with your understanding and manifestation, you can contribute to the greater whole. And that's really, I think, where all of us have at least one collective tie in with this, is that we're wanting to do that because we are a part of this third wave, these volunteers, these starseeds. And so that's why you feel that calling inside of you. That's why you can't turn this off. I have, I call them sleepers, but like people in my life who are like, why do you spend so much time doing this stuff? Like, I don't get it. They're on a different frequency than we are. So they're not going to understand whatever answer I give to them. I mean, for me, a lot of it was with the child stuff. Like, I can't, you can't not turn this off once you learn this material. Like, it sticks with you. And you think, my God, there's so much depravity. Like Q says, you have to invent a new term to put on this, to describe this all. So anyway, with my talk, I'm really looking forward to this. And for those who, I'll put a little plug in for everybody, go to campdisclosure.com. You can buy your tickets there. It's dirt cheap. And I mean, I was so blessed last year. I got to go to ECETI in July. I got to go to DOD in August and actually speak there. I got to finally meet Jace. Jace, I don't know if you know this, but you were like one of the first people that I knew when all of this was starting.
Really? That's funny.
And I knew you before you even dated Alexis. Alexis was actually the first person I think that I reached out to when all this was going down. And like, I just joined DTI and I'm like, I need a community. Like, I need other people I can talk to about all this. Yeah. And I remember, I think you had just like graduated college, hadn't you, or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. So, we've, I saw a meme earlier that I really like.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
we lost him.
Did we lose him? Did we lose Alex? We got a frozen moment.
It's the AI.
Maybe they didn't. Okay, well, we're gonna let him roll back in. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the timing
found too good of a role. The AI was like, that's just too much truth. Just stop.
Alex, I hope you make it back. That said, anyway, we're just gonna go ahead and jump in here. And so yeah, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Roger. I know Roger had to bounce. We've been here for a while. That said, Alex just said it, everybody. The reason why we're kind of gathered here together today is to just kind of talk about our viewpoints, our understandings, where we're at individually with the collective craziness or the activation, or what is ultimately, for those of you guys that are watching, an actual dimensional shift. We all agreed to incarnate for this whole weird thing that we're in. And so that said, we've been here for a while and we're going to go ahead and take off in a few moments. You can see the numbers are dwindling on our screen, but for those of you guys that are interested, please check out the link in the description and also in the chat for Camp Disclosure. I will be doing a workshop there as well. And also a talk. I know Z is going to be doing a thing and Jace as well. But that said, let us know what you guys are doing. And then Z, if you still feel like it, go ahead and bring us out with whatever you have in mind.
So you just want me to tell everybody what I'm doing at the event, right?
You're gonna talk a little bit about what you're bringing to Camp Disclosure. Jace is gonna let us know kind of what he's been doing there, and then you can go ahead and do whatever you feel. Okay. I'm just here to hang out.
So I'm really excited to be at Camp Disclosure. I'm gonna be offering a presentation on the first day about the ground crew mission. I'm seeing there's somebody, Laura, commenting in the comments there. Literally thought I was here for a reason, but I'm done pretending I'm important. or helpful. Love you all.
There we go.
And
Technology. I just clicked it. I don't know. There we go.
Wow, that's fancy.
so I just want to say to you, Laura, that I love you so much and that we are all here for a reason. That is true. But sometimes the reason is just to have fun. It's just to smell the roses. It's just to play outside and run around in the forest. And I think that there are two different parts of most of us who are wanderers. There is the earth self and there is the star self. And that's another dimension of ZArtStar Healer, is that we're really bringing those two pieces together. And I feel like a lot of times the galactic star self can really be dragging the earth self through the initiations, being like, we got a mission to do, like, let's get this thing over with. And like the earth self is like, I'm just breathing and trying to have a life here. Like, what do you want from me? And it's really important for us to honor and acknowledge and love all these different parts of ourselves that have all of these different feelings through all of the different experiences that we're going through. And so we're really going to be talking about the wanderer and the starseed's journey, how we can dissect the different not levels but aspects of integration, and how we can, through that integration, actually get grounded and embodied enough to go out and do something. And sometimes that something is just playing in a creek, which is also really fun and important to do. And then on the second day, I'm going to be offering an oracle medicine ceremony, which is when I channel these frequencies and sounds, and I also use kind of like, it's not like hypnosis, but I'll say words too to help us pinpoint certain mind virus things, and we can clear those out. It's literal medicine for all of these viruses and sicknesses that we're talking about. So it is a very beautiful experience where we're literally just basking in the vibration of our divine self. And through the embodiment of that grace, we are clearing out any vibrations that are not in resonance with that, because this is something that we're exploring. Somebody was asking, what makes something artificial? And so when we tune into and tap into the divine consciousness, the creator consciousness inside of ourselves, then we will be able to perceive what is artificial and what is not artificial, because we're tuning into the genetics or the intent of creation itself. And so when that happens, actually your body knows, right? Like, you have a state of being healthy. And then if something, a virus or a bacteria that's not supposed to be there, not intended as a part of the creation to be in balance, your body literally gets sick, has a fever, or whatever, it does to get rid of that thing that is, artificial or foreign to your system. So just as below, so above, all of that is true still, that as a collective and on a planetary level, if there is a virus, then we will be able to see that that is artificial. So I'm gonna pass the mic over to Jace.
No, thank you.
Okay, yes, I'm unmuted. I will be having a music workshop, interactive dance party type experience. Still vibing out what it's going to be. We're going to see what people are into, but that's going to be Friday night. And then I'm also going to be hosting and announcing. So I'll be announcing all of the fabulous speakers that we have here, including Roger, who's not here anymore. And yep, that's my role. So I hope to see you guys there. And just as another reminder, live stream tickets are available on the website. They're super cheap. They're like $44, and highly, highly recommend it for anybody that's like, North Carolina is way too far. It's going to be great and really, really cheap. So I think it's totally doable and really recommend it. And I hope to see you guys there.
Put that link in there. Put that link in the description for Camp Disclosure live stream tickets. Alex, is there anything else you wanted to? You were saying your workshop you're going to do at Camp Disclosure before you dropped off. Real quickly. Anything else?
Yeah, it was so weird. I could still hear you guys, but then I couldn't see you. So
yeah, it was weird. I was like,
weird.
These I'm draconians, I guess, huh? First of all, I think for those who watch this, if you're on the fence or you think, it's just too far, I want to say this, and that is, Nothing replaces going to these events in person. That I was so blown away when I went to those 2 events last year, that especially if you feel called to be a part of this, well, I don't think you'd be listening if you weren't, but like to think that, like, I don't know, that starseed thing, like maybe that kind of sounds like me or whatever. I'm telling you, come to this. And I'm not saying that just because we're all going to this and we're trying to promote this. Like, when I went to those 2 events last year, I literally felt like I was home. Like I was with people that I had maybe, talked to a lot online, but never had met in person. And I'm like, you guys are like, it's like a soul family vibration. And it's kind of hard to put into words, but that energy alone and being able to interact, make connections, have just these delicious conversations that go like well into the night, I mean, nothing replaces that. You can watch the content on the live stream, yes, but it's not just about the presenters. It's about all of us. It's about bathing in the energies. And I just can't emphasize that part enough. So I have 2 events that I'll be doing. One is going to be a main stage event, and then the other is going to be a workshop. The main stage event is kind of like what I was talking about before I got dropped off. It's looking at how we can use psychology to better manifest our personal and collective life, to live our masterpiece life, the highest version of whatever it means for us to have an expression in this lifetime reality, and how we can use these energies to tap into the collective whole. If you haven't looked up Maharishi effect, check it out. The science behind this is so fascinating to know that all it takes, you guys, is 1% of the population of any given area, and to come together and to channel intentionally your collective energy, that there were all of these effects that they found. Crime went down, arrests went down, violence went down, just during this time period, I think for like even a few days afterwards from this. So we are in the baby infancy stages of awakening to how to harness this energy power. And by coming to these events and listening to these speakers, you're going to literally be on the cutting edge of what's next, what the new science is showing. So I'm really excited to be a part of this. And then my workshop is going to be, how do we have compassionate conversations with those that are well earlier on in the path, or don't give two you-know-whats about any of this kind of awakening process? Like, how do we still interact with them? Or for those who are interested, how do we quote unquote red pill? Like, how do we do that effectively? And there's an absolute science to how to do this, as well as an art, which takes practice. And so I'll be kind of going through and unpacking all of that. So, and I'll have memes in there, don't worry. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss this. And like they were saying, you can do the live stream. I mean, what's $44? I mean, that it's just, when I saw that, I'm like,
ever.
My God, are you kidding me? $44 for the whole
4 days. 4 days.
That's like ridiculously cheap. That's like less than a dinner if you go out. You know?
Right.
So anyway,
we want to
Thanks
see
for
you
having
guys
me.
on the live stream. Yeah, no, thank you for being here. Honestly, I'm truly, truly glad that you made it. I know you're probably like, what am I doing with this weird guy going on this live stream? But yeah, no, thank you, everyone, and especially Roger that was here earlier. But if you guys are watching, we got about 70 people in the house across a couple platforms. Please do share this video. Please help us get the word out. If you're familiar with what I do, you can tell that I am not sponsored by anyone. I am not being fed by any three-letter agency. No one's funding Matthew. No one really even wants me on their podcast. Everything I do is entirely of my own creation and the energy and the multidimensional soul group that works with me. So when you guys find this message, when you hear the call, when you stumble across this strange stream on your Facebook timeline, it is for a reason. It is because you are part of a soul group of individuals who chose to come together during this time in our collective evolution. And so thank you guys for being here. We're going to roll out in a few minutes. Once again, we are everyone that you see on this screen. We're all going to be at Camp Disclosure, August 27th through 30th. Lots of links for that. We also have the kids program that they mentioned in the chat. But that said, we're going to roll out with Z doing a little bit of a transmission. I will just mention our websites really quick for those of you guys that are interested in learning about real multidimensional development of your true intuitive abilities. If you're wondering what it's like to have an actual real energy clearing or what real psychic multidimensional tarot is, please contact me at my website, rememberyourmission.com. Additionally, we also have Z, who's going to be doing a little bit of a transmission in a minute, but I believe you're at earthstar.tk. Is that correct, Z?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. And then I believe Jace is at Cosmic Origins on YouTube, but you guys also have the Divine Sovereign Beings website as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, divinesovereignbeings.com. I just threw it in the chat.
Nice. And then Alex, do you have any website or any place for people to grab?
So I need to revamp my website. And in the process of doing that, as I'm moving the infrastructure with my online course that's going to be rolling out here soon. So it's just my name, dralexbloom.com. Nice. But I'm also, and you can message me through Facebook Messenger if you want to get a hold of me. I have a professional Facebook page. It's just Alex Bloom, PSY.D. That's my degree. And then I'm trying to get, so I have a YouTube channel, just type in my name, Alex Bloom, and you'll see it. I'm trying to get my numbers up for my YouTube channel because I'm going to be leading a tour to Egypt next spring. And I want to be able to do YouTube lives through my phone while I'm there. So that's kind of why I'm encouraging people that if you have any interest in what we've been talking about, to go and subscribe so I can have that unlocked for my phone.
Are there still spots open for that trip?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, please subscribe to his page, you guys. Seriously, I want to see this. It'll literally take maybe 10 minutes for people to click on this guy's thing and to get him to, was it like 1,500 you got to have now in order for them to let you do
something like that.
I know. Yeah. Please, you guys, check out Alex's links, and please check us out at Camp Disclosure. We're going to go ahead and roll out here. I know we've been here all day and everyone's like, come on. But Z, please feel free to take us out. I love you guys, and thank you for hanging out. Yeah.
All right, I'm just going to go right into a sound healing. So thank you, everybody, so much for being here with us today. And so just invite you to kind of get out of that mind state that we have been in for the last couple of hours and just tune into the body. Tune into your heart. Feel how exciting it is to be invited to play in the playground with your friends at this event that we will be at. This playground from which we're going to envision a future that we would want to leave for our children and beyond. And how exciting and joyful that feels in our heart to be together and to play together. And I just invite you to come into a place of calmness to receive this love and support that is here for you. Every single one of you that is here, we're so grateful that you are here, and we love you so, so much. Eeyore.